So I've been spending a significant amount of time with Ys Proud Nordics on the Switch 2, and my expectations going in were complicated. Usually when a definitive edition drops only a year or two after the original, it feels like a transparent double dip, and this argument has a lot of merit on home console. But for Nintendo hardware, this isn't just another port, it's a generational jump. The original Nordics was a 2024 title built for the constraints of the original Switch. But now, we're seeing Adol's latest adventures landing on significantly more powerful hardware. This shifts the entire perspective of this review. I'm no longer just looking at extra DLC or a few new costumes. I'm looking at whether this hardware bump finally allows the game's ambition to match its performance. With that in mind, is Proud Nordics the technical realization this game always deserved, or is the Switch 2 badge just a fresh coat of paint on a familiar voyage? Let's get into it. Story-wise, this is classic Ys, which is both a compliment and occasionally a limitation. You're playing as Adol Kristin again, professional adventurer and apparently the unluckiest tourist alive. This time paired with Kaja, a pirate princess who ends up mystically linked to him. That forced partnership drives a lot of the narrative, and honestly, it works best when the game leans into that relationship rather than the broader fantasy plot. Kaja brings personality. She challenges Adol in ways the series doesn't always do with supporting characters, and their back and forth gives the story its strongest moments. When the writing focuses on character interaction, it feels lively. When it shifts to exposition or world building, it sometimes loses its momentum, a lot of the times down to the excessive loading screens. The Nordic maritime setting is a big plus. Sailing between islands, naval combat, exploring coastal settlements, gradually uncovering threats across the sea. It gives the adventure a sense of journey that suits Ys really well. Your boats act as a social hub to catch up on the story and bond with the side characters. You can pick up quests from them, shop, cook, upgrade weapons, and just generally expand on the adventure of the game. Each new character that joins the team allows you to upgrade various different parts of your vessel for combat, speed, and so on. And yes, they have sped up the sea traversal by implementing wind currents, of which you can unlock more by winning naval skirmishes. It's not the deepest narrative you're going to experience, but it's comfortable, earnest, and easy to sink into. What I kept asking myself though, was whether that added Proud Nordics content actually fixes the pacing issues from the original. The answer is partially. It rounds things out with extra characters and side content, but it doesn't fundamentally transform the story. If you didn't click with Ys 10 narrative originally, this version probably won't suddenly convert you. The gameplay, however, is still where Ys really proves itself, and thankfully that hasn't changed. The combat remains fast, responsive, and built around momentum. When you're dodging attacks at the last second, chaining skills together, and staying aggressive, it feels fantastic. There's a rhythm to it that Ys has always handled well, almost arcade-like in how it rewards timing and positioning. This entry utilises a new dual protagonist system where you can freely switch between Adol and Kaja whenever you want. You directly control one of them whilst the other fights alongside you, which keeps the encounters dynamic without ever overwhelming you with full party micromanagement. Together they are linked by the mana link mechanic, a big part of this. Holding a trigger essentially brings both characters together, unlocking stronger, combined abilities. These attacks hit harder, but at the same time, that stance also acts as a guard, which creates a nice risk-reward balance between offense and defense. Whilst the game has its difficulties at times, enemy attacks are telegraphed in a pretty readable way. Red glow attacks can be perfectly guarded if you time the block right, triggering a counter opportunity. If your timing's slightly off, you will still block, sometimes parry, but getting it just right can open the door to a much bigger combo attack. There's a similar idea with the blue mark speed attacks, where a well-timed evade and dodge can create the same kind of advantage, although I found these slightly trickier to react to consistently. Gear progression itself is fairly straightforward. You'll be buying, upgrading, and trading equipment for both characters using money, loot, or rarer trade items. Those trade items can save a lot of currency, especially later on when upgrades start costing serious amounts. And overall, I think this is where Proud Nordics works best. It doesn't reinvent Ys combat, but it refines it. The systems in play feel tighter and more responsive on the Switch 2 version, and that smoothness makes the entire gameplay loop more enjoyable. And while on the topic of combat, there are some genuinely great boss fights on offer, and they do a good job of testing how well you've actually learned the combat systems, rather than just how much damage you can output. And the game is fairly forgiving. If one character gets knocked out, the other can revive them without needing an item, although revival items do exist. They'll come back with only a small amount of health, but on easier difficulties, that's usually enough time to recoup and get back at it. And speaking of difficulties, there are 5 settings overall, so if you want something more demanding, the higher tiers definitely offer that. And if you do hit a wall during a boss fight, the game gives you a choice, either retry as is, or weaken the boss slightly before attempting again. This approach means you rarely get stuck, which I think works well for maintaining momentum in a long RPG. There are times when some of the boss encounters slightly overstay their welcome though, especially if you have to try multiple times, but for the most part, they are nice and varied, and often involve utilising a number of mechanics that keep them fresh and engaging. That said, it's not entirely smooth sailing. There are a couple of boss encounters where the difficulty jumps noticeably, and even playing fairly carefully, deaths happen. Honestly, probably more than you'd like, but usually in a way that feels like part of a learning curve rather than outright frustration, at least on the easier settings. I tried the hardest difficulty once, and I'm never going back. In terms of your character progression, you have your generic leveling up, and you also have the release mana tree. It's essentially a progression system made up of nodes that you spend skill points on to unlock. As you explore the world, you'll come across specific locations where you can create what are called mana seeds, and these seeds boost one of 3 main stats: attack, power, defense, or magical abilities, and you slot them into the tree to strengthen your characters. The more you level up, the more of that tree opens up, giving you additional options. It's straightforward and intuitive, but with that said, while it works fundamentally, I did find the skill tree itself a bit underwhelming. It does the basics of improving stats and unlocking abilities, but it never felt exciting or integral. Most of the time, I just unlocked the next node and placed in whatever spare seeds I had left, and it never really felt like it changed too much. It's functional, it does the job, but it's probably one of the least memorable systems in the game. The additional content added for those of you that have played the original includes new characters and game modes, upgrade paths for your mana tools, and some brilliant post-game content. And whilst I don't want to spoil too much, I will say you have the Divine Realm, a brand new super dungeon, which is a brutal level 99 time attack gauntlet that really tests how well you've mastered the parry system. And you also have the Colosseum, that lets you refight story mode bosses and has challenge modes that earn you rewards to upgrade your mana tools, along with some cosmetics, and so on. This is all located on Oland Island, exclusive to this version of the game, essentially a DLC that offers 10 hours of content with a new mega boss. Visually, this version benefits massively from the Switch 2 hardware, but it's important to frame expectations correctly. Ys has never been about photorealism. It leans into a more stylized anime aesthetic with bold colours and clarity during fast action. What the Switch 2 brings is stability, cleaner edges, better anti-aliasing, and improved draw distance, and obviously, less pop-in. And that pop-in improvement is really noticeable. On Switch 1, environmental details and clutter would almost appear on your head. Here, that transition is pushed further and further out, which makes the exploration feel less technically constrained. Overall, I did find the visual presentation really enjoyable and quite easy on the eyes. Unlike the original version, that even when docked was 720p with dynamic resolution and used a fuzzy temporal anti-aliasing which made the game look soft and blurred. This remake now offers 1080p DLSS upscale to 4K quality when docked and a native 1080p in handheld, and that's for the quality mode. For the performance mode, it's a native 720 or 1080p in handheld and docked respectively, both targeting 120 frames per second. And that performance is where this re-release lives or dies. The original Switch version targeted around 30 frames per second, and while it generally held that, dips did happen in heavier combat or busier scenes. Resolution was dynamic, around the 720p range, and load times were noticeable, roughly half a minute from dashboard to game, and then 15 seconds in-game, and it did kill the immersion at times, because there are so many loading screens. It wasn't disastrous, but it was clearly hardware limited. The Switch 2, however, changes the equation significantly. The quality mode targets 60 frames per second, and as a performance mode, aiming toward 120. Neither of these are locked, but they are pretty darn consistent, and that extra smoothness genuinely affects how the game feels. It really does feel brilliant. Dodges are more reliable, combat reads better, and input response feels tighter. This is especially important in ease because the combat system is built all around reaction timing. However, I did find myself sticking to the quality mode more often than not. I found the 60 frames per second perfectly fine. I just preferred that graphical fidelity. But I know many of you will prefer that 120 crispness. Now, unfortunately I had a bit of a brain fart in figuring out why I couldn't capture the performance footage at 120, and then realised my capture card doesn't support that. So this is just going to have to be a trust me bro moment. But it has been widely reported that in performance mode, it stays north of 100 for the vast majority of the game, outside of the naval combat. But with quality mode, in the open water, just sailing and skirmishing, it's a pretty consistent 60 FPS. You do get the occasional fluctuation in particle clatter, but you are looking at a pretty smooth experience with very little deviation. And this is typically the worst performing part of the game. And when moving into the combat, it's a similar story. It's pretty damn stable at 60. It might as well have been locked because it didn't deviate once, even in the cutscenes and all of the ability special effects. As for load times, on the whole they are fine. It isn't an open world game, so there are plenty of load screens between each house and zone, but they never feel too long or bothersome, for the most part. On the whole, it feels, looks, and plays fantastically well. As I said, I personally found myself drawn to the quality mode. The little extra sharpness won me over, and 60 FPS is enough for me. But as a handheld hybrid experience, it is dramatically better than before. This brings us to the slightly awkward timing of this release. On one hand, this is clearly the best Switch version. Performance improvements, added content, polish. It's not trivial. On the other hand, there is no universal upgrade path, and depending on your situation, that means potentially paying full price again. That's something worth acknowledging, and it does feel a little shady. The only thing I can think of is that it's created on a completely different engine. Ultimately, whether this bothers you probably depends on whether you've already played Ys 10 recently. I feel for those of you who have recently paid full whack for a copy, as it's pretty damn premium price. And just quickly on the price, just to ground expectations, on the Nintendo eShop, it's sitting at £62.99 digitally. That's €69.99 in Europe. In the US, you are also looking at £69.99, and in Canada, $89.99. That puts it firmly in the premium RPG bracket, with a download size of roughly 9GB, which is actually pretty manageable compared to many modern releases. And yes, there are physical editions available, coming in the form of game keycards. In my opinion, the price is a little high. It's a good game with plenty of content on offer. You are looking about 40 hours just for the main story, and you can easily get another 40 hours just out of the end game content and side content. But I do feel like a lot of the offerings in the game are cosmetics, and to some degree, it feels like a bit of polish is missing. But if you're a fan of the franchise, then I imagine it's more than worth the entry price. Just depends on whether you want to pay it for a second time. Overall, I've had a genuinely good time with Ys 10 Proud Nordics on Switch 2, but I think the context matters a lot here. If you're coming from the original version, this feels like a generational upgrade, moving from a mostly 30 frames per second experience with longer load times and softer visuals to a 60 FPS baseline, sometimes higher, with faster loading and cleaner presentation in a meaningful leap. It genuinely improves almost every aspect of how the game feels moment to moment. On other platforms, the jump is naturally less dramatic. If you've already played this on PlayStation or PC where the performance was already strong, this version doesn't fundamentally change the experience in the same way. So my recommendation lands like this. If you've never played Ys 10 and you want it on Switch 2, this is absolutely the version to get. If you already played it recently elsewhere, the upgrade is nice, but it's not transformative. While the added content is great, it's primarily post-game content, and what feels like a DLC offering an additional 6 to 8 hours, which is substantial, and if you could simply pay a small upgrade fee, it would 100% be worth it. But the fact there is no upgrade path from the original release is baffling. And honestly, I'm curious where people land on this. I can't be alone in thinking this is ridiculous. Even if it's an issue with different engines, just offering anyone who bought the game recently a chance to upgrade for the price difference would be a nice gesture. But at the end of the day, I guess it's a business. But stripping away the re-release conversation and the hardware improvements, Ys 10 stands as a very strong entry in the series, though not necessarily its most ambitious. At its best, it delivers exactly what Ys fans want: fast, responsive combat with a satisfying sense of flow. The dual character system gives battles a tighter, more focused identity than previous party-based entries, and the mana link mechanic adds a layer of tactical timing that keeps encounters engaging well into the late game. When boss fights demand precision and reward well-timed counters, the system really shines. The maritime structure also works in its favour. Sailing between islands gives the game a sense of scale and progression that feels natural rather than artificially segmented. That loop of exploring, fighting, upgrading and pushing forward is clean, well-paced, and for the majority of the experience, fantastic. Where it falls slightly short, however, is in its depth. The progression systems, particularly the mana tree, are functional but not especially compelling. They serve the combat rather than elevating it. The story, while charming and well delivered, doesn't take any major risks. It's confident, but pretty safe. That safety isn't inherently a flaw, but it does mean that Ys 10 feels more like a refinement of the series formula rather than any form of evolution. Ultimately, Ys 10 is a polished, focused action RPG that understands what it does well and rarely strays outside of that lane. It may not redefine the genre, but it doesn't need to. It delivers consistent, energetic combat, a cohesive adventure structure, and enough challenge to stay engaging. If you value tight action systems and steady progression over sprawling complexity, it's an easy recommendation just on its own merits. So, let me know, if you played the original Ys 10, are you jumping back in for Proud Nordics or sticking with what you've already experienced? Drop it in the comments, and if you enjoyed the review, like, subscribe, and all the usual stuff. But with that said, thanks for watching, stay cozy, and yeah, I'll see you around.
Not here.